Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be part one in probably a two-part video where we rebuild this new process 435 transmission. The starting point here is a little bit different than I usually do. I usually start with as I pull it off of a vehicle and completely take it apart. This transmission was already taken somewhat apart when I received it. It was already in this wooden cradle, which is actually kind of handy. It had been painted. You can see it's partially disassembled. This transmission came with a lot of other pieces too. Came with a bell housing, a used clutch disc, the pedals for in the vehicle. I'm hoping all of the linkage, the clutch fork, a bunch of things like that. The idea is the vehicle was originally an automatic and I'm going to change it to a 4-speed. Someone has gone through and at least done a little bit of cleanup. Taken off the covers again, taken off the top. This is the 3 and 4 synchro, which should normally be sitting right here, so somebody's had it at least a little bit apart. But generally speaking, it looks like it's in good shape, and I got a really good price on it. The new Process 435 transmission was used for a lot of years. I think it started probably in the early 60s, maybe back as far as the 50s. And then it was used all the way up, I think, even into the 90s. Don't quote me on those numbers, but a long range of time at any rate. It was also used in a lot of different models. So Dodge used it. This is going to go into a Dodge. What it came out of, I really don't know. Probably a Dodge since it has the pedals that, again, I'm hoping fit into this truck. But Chevy also used it. Ford also used it. One really important thing to know about the 435 is it is a 4-speed transmission, but first gear is a real low gear, often called granny gear, and it is not usable for a whole lot other than maybe rock crawling and, pulling stumps and things like that. Usually when you have one of these in the vehicle, you start out in second gear and shift up through fourth. Oftentimes the pattern actually on the shift knob is L1, 2, 3. So it's mostly, can be looked at as a 3-speed transmission with a low gear that you rarely, if ever, use. This is not ideal for what I want. I would have liked a 5-speed. I wanted an overdrive, but finding something that is an overdrive that would fit in this, that is a divorce transfer case, and, within driving distance and not a fortune. All of those things added up to me going with the 435. One thing that might be of interest here is this is the input shaft here. Most of these that you find have a tapered roller bearing right here, but you can see this is a ball bearing. So that means that this guy is actually pretty old. I think they quit using the ball bearing here in about 1965. So my guess is this is an early 60s transmission. The output shaft, however, which is real nice, largely speaking, you've got this 4-bolt flange here that's kind of a trapezoid. I think that's common on a 4-wheel drive, and it's more square on a 2-wheel drive. Regardless, for my application, this is perfect because this fits on there, and you can see it's splined with a nut. It did not come with a yoke, but I had one laying around, so that'll go right on there. It's important for my application because I have a divorce transfer case, a new Process 203. In fact, that's it right there. That goes behind this, so there's a small drive shaft that goes from the transmission to the transfer case, and then 2 more drive shafts, one to the front and one to the rear. So it's important to know what type of a rear output you've got for the application you're going to use it in. Obviously, if you're starting with a completely assembled transmission, a few things you have to do. You have to take the top off. You have 4 bolts back here to take the cover off. And then there's an inspection cover here, and there's one on the other side as well. Obviously, make sure you drain the fluid. Drain hole is down here. This one's missing the plug. Maybe it's in one of these bags or boxes that came with it. And this is the fill up here. Next, I'm going to remove the input bearing retainer. This looks like a brand new bearing, and this cover looks like it was just put on to, keep it in place. There should be gasket material here that needs to be cleaned up, but just check to make sure that everything is nice and smooth, no obvious, gouges or anything like that on it. Again, this one is a little bit different because this is a ball bearing. I believe on most of them, you'll have the tapered bearing is here and the race is pressed into the housing here. Not 100% on that because, well, this is the ball bearing type, so I don't have one with the tapered to show you. For the ball bearing, this bearing comes out this direction. You don't need to take this ring off or anything. That's a retaining ring to keep the bearing from going that direction into the case. If you've got the tapered roller in the input side, my guess is when you take the retainer off, this shaft comes out real easily. In this case, I've got that bearing in there, and it's probably interference fit, so it needs to get pushed out. The input shaft and the output shaft are separate pieces. They're separated and they butt up against each other, right? Really where the 3/4 synchros sandwich together. So I should be able to drive on this to push that out now that I have that retainer off. Yeah, this bearing is coming out. Well, it's starting to fight me. So I'm going to use an aluminum rod and come in from the back side. Basically, I'm going to come in right here and drive against that. I think as I'm driving it, it's trying to tip like this and not wanting to come out. So maybe a little leverage down here. This bearing looks like it is just pressed on. There is no groove here for a retaining ring. The output on this, yours would look just like this. This one's already been disassembled at least somewhat. This bearing is off, but there is a snap ring that goes right here. So an external will be right in here holding this bearing in. So you'll have to take this snap ring off, and then this bearing slides out. You can check the bearing just like you do any roller bearing. Just make sure it spins freely and doesn't have any, I guess, crunchiness that you can feel. This one feels pretty good, but occasionally I feel something. It could just be a little bit of grit in there that once I clean it out with solvent will go away. The kit likely comes with a new one, and if I'm this far into it, there's no point in not replacing it. Once you have the input shaft removed and the output, basically the bearing removed from it, we can tilt the whole thing and pull the gears out through the top. There is a spacer ring here that goes up on that. Make sure you keep track of it and don't lose it. Next, I'm going to pull the idler shaft. There's a cover on the output side that has 4 bolts holding it in. Again, this one's been partially taken apart, so they're already missing. Inside here, you have a needle bearing, and then you have a thrust bearing. So we've got that thrust washer in there that this thrust bearing rides against. This cover is aluminum, so it provides a steel surface for this thrust bearing to run on. If you take the intermediate shaft, lift it, and pull it toward the rear here just a little bit, there's another needle bearing in the case in the front. You can pull it out of that, and then we can just work it out the top just like we did the main shafts. There's that needle bearing at the front. The only thing left in the case now is the reverse gear, which is right here. And it rides on this shaft, so we have to pull this shaft. This shaft gets driven out this direction and comes out right here. This shaft has a retainer. It's a little confusing here. I don't think it's actually on there. I think it's been pulled out on this transmission. So this shaft basically has a groove or a notch cut in the underside of it. And then it has this that just kind of goes up into that groove, keeps it from moving forward and back. And then there's a bolt that goes through here to hold it in. There's no space right here with this wood for that bolt and this retainer to be there, so I don't think it's in. I'll take an eyeball real quick down here. That notch is only through part of this shaft. It doesn't go all the way around. So I'll take a look and see if I can see anything, but it right now doesn't look like there is anything. And then we'll take a drift, come through the hole from the input side, and try to drive it out. Yeah, it's not real evident here. It's hard to see with the lighting, but there's a groove here and there's nothing in it. So I'm going to take this brass drift and I'm going to run right through here against it and then smack it out the, I guess that would be the rear of the transmission. Just drive it until basically it comes out of this hole, so it's press fit or interference fit here. Once it comes out of that, then it slides pretty easily. Now you can just grab it here at the rear and hold onto the gears and pull it out. And that comes out. This does have a long roller bearing in it. Part number is stamped on it, but you can see if you look down the bore, it's completely solid all the way through. So this is one bearing, the depth of this, double gear. Still got the needle bearing in here, the input side for that idler. And right here, it looks like that's a magnet. It looks like a spring steel retainer that grabs onto this rib right here and then pushes down in. I honestly don't feel any need to remove that because I don't want to bend that and then not be able to get it back in. So I'll just clean it all up. But I can see, metal fur kind of sticking to it. So I'm relatively certain that's a magnet. This bearing, I can't get to it from here because of this wood. So there's the bearing here. I can just push it out from this side. So I'm just going to again use the seal and bearing driver kit that I use on a whole lot of this project. Find one that is real close but not too big around because you don't want it getting stuck in the case. Now you can't just drive that because that sticks through and you'd be beating on the center of the bearing. So I just use it and then the next size smaller above it. This hole has a little bit of a chamfer around it, and I'm concerned that I drove it that far, but I think I'm now starting to hit the case with a 48 millimeter, so I'm going to go down to the 47, basically flip them around. I'll throw a rag in the case to catch it. And a new one of these should come with the rebuild kit. Alright, the case is completely emptied and ready to be cleaned. It has been painted on the sides, but it was not painted on the ends where the wood was attached. So I'll have to pull the board off the other side and get the rest of it cleaned up and coated. Next, let's inspect the internals and look at disassembling the main shaft. So the drive shaft, you want to inspect. Start here. This is where the throw-out bearing goes into the back of the crankshaft. This is where the clutch disc rides, so make sure all the teeth there are good. This bearing, make sure that it turns smoothly. This one I think is brand new, never been run. It's also a Japanese Nachi bearing, so I'm definitely going to reuse it. Check this gear, make sure all of the teeth are good, nothing broken. Especially pay attention to the ends of the gears. And then this portion here, the ends of them are rounded. You want to make sure that they are round, not flattened out or, broken off. Those engage the synchro. Like this, to drive what gear you're in. The synchro is generally softer than these, so this is what usually wears out. We'll take a look at the synchro in a little bit. Then at the end of this shaft, we've got a set of roller bearings in here. These ones are held in by grease right now. Don't be surprised if yours just fall out as you're disassembling. And then those are held in by this lock ring here. Hey there, this is Chris in editing. You might notice that I'm a little hesitant talking here, and it's because this is actually together wrong, and I'm a little confused. This washer should be underneath the snap ring that is right below it. We'll get to that when we reassemble it, but note, when you're pulling it apart, if it looks like this, it's not right. Then while we're in here, we want to take a look at the synchros. Let's have these shells that sandwich everything together. They do rely on friction here and here. So take a look, make sure that they aren't obviously worn. And then pay special attention to the teeth on the synchros. So this edge of the teeth, these ones, they're shiny, so they're obviously used. But make sure that they don't have any flat spots. Make sure they don't have, any things that are like sharp edges. If you have any problems on these, that's what's going to cause it to grind as you're shifting between gears. This is the 3 and 4 synchro, so this is going to be obviously for going into 3rd and 4th. Don't know which direction it was installed. This side looks really nice, so my guess is this was the 4th gear side. And it's a little bit flattened out there. This side isn't horrible though. That tooth right there doesn't really thrill me. A couple of them down here. So I will probably at least take a look at the price of replacing this. It does not come with the kit, unfortunately. We have one more synchro that's inside here that is the 2nd gear synchro. So we'll take a look at that when we're in it before we order any more parts. All right, so the main shaft, I'm going to take the 2nd gear off. Just like on that drive shaft, inspect here. These teeth are what engage the synchro. And obviously go around the whole outside, make sure all of these are good. When you're inside there are a couple of these spring steel retainers, so make sure you're paying attention you don't lose those. To disassemble the main shaft any further, we've got a lock ring right here that has to come off. I'm going to use a set of lock ring pliers for this. I'll put a link down in the description for it. You can probably get it with a screwdriver and a whole lot of swearing, but really something like this makes it way easier. Even with them, it doesn't really want to come out. There it is. Again, without a set of these, I would not want to do that. As you take these off, inspect them. You're looking for, broken, worn teeth. Also look inside these for any apparent scuff marks, scoring, or overheating. So if they get really hot, they'll change color. As you take them off, inspect all of the teeth, just as you have been. Make sure they aren't broken or worn. But also take a look inside the bores. Make sure that they aren't scuffed up or discolored. If they're discolored, like, blue or purple, it's because they got hot. One of the main reasons that a 435 will get hot and eat the insides of these bores is if you flat toe it, even in neutral, but with the drive shaft attached, what happens is the drive shaft turns the transmission, but it doesn't get lubricated because it's designed to be driven from the front. So if just the rear is turning but not the front, it doesn't lubricate these, and these will go bad. That means if you've got one of these and you're rebuilding it, make sure if you ever tow it, disconnect the drive shaft. The last piece we have to remove is a lock ring right here. And this one's a little bit strange because it's actually a two-piece ring, so it's not like a snap ring. In fact, this is the only application I've ever seen one of these rings. So there's a split right here in it. And if I spin it around, there's another one completely opposite that over here. And these things hook together. So it's quite fun to pull them apart. What you want to do is you want to get in right here and lever it out and over. Like that. And then spin it around. Try to do the same over here. So you can see these go together like that. Once you have that lock ring off, this comes off. Now we just have this retaining ring here. It's kind of a spring steel and it's going into notches here. Just some large pliers. You can grab it, squeeze it. That comes out. And then this comes apart. Now, just like with everything else, inspect everything, paying close attention to these teeth here. That really covers it for disassembling the new Process 435. I still have the cover and shift fork assembly. I'm going to take it apart, inspect it, clean it, maybe put in new bushings, all of that. For now, I'm just going to take this over to the solvent tank and spend some time getting everything clean. Then we'll come back and put everything together in another video. And that's all there is to it. Thanks for watching. As I was cleaning this up, I noticed that this input shaft was assembled incorrectly. I suspect that whoever was taking it apart, they must have just put it together wrong. So the roller bearings were in here with grease, and then this was just sitting on top of it like this. That's not correct. See that little snap ring there? That's supposed to be above this. That holds this ring in against the bearings, and then the bearings sit between it and the bottom. So I've got to take this ring out and put this in on top of the bearings. Just something to note. Just something to be aware of anytime you're taking things apart. Don't assume that it was done properly.